Hey guys, welcome back to the Explain series. This is week 2, and we're going to talk about how context brings us clarity. Last week we said that Jesus makes the Bible clearer, but the truth is Jesus doesn't physically show up in Scripture until the New Testament, and then even the references to him before have to be explained through the New Testament. So Jesus helps us see God more clearly and helps us see the whole story of God and humans more clearly. But what are we supposed to do with the rest of the Bible where we don't really see him showing up in the physical sense? What about verses that seem weird, or stories that seem crazy, or commands that don't make sense? Sometimes there's a disconnect between what we're told about the Bible and what we actually experience when we read it. We're told the Bible can change us and help us and guide us, but when it's time to read it for ourselves, sometimes we walk away confused. We don't know why people would say some of those things. Is there something that we're missing, that I'm missing? Is there a different way to do this? And that's what we're going to talk about today when we talk about the context of the Bible. Understanding what the Bible is and why it's meant to be helps us to get into the Bible in a way that maybe we haven't before. It helps us understand it. There are two halves of the Bible, and that's kind of where we have to start. There's the Old Testament, which is the Jewish Bible that is pre-Jesus, and then there's the New Testament, which includes Jesus and his ministry and his life, and then the start of the church after Jesus died and came back to life. The Bible actually has 66 different documents that get put together to make it this complete book. And so it's interesting because it would be like if I said, what I want you to do is I want you to take a comparison. I want you to take a book of poetry. I want you to take some song lyrics that mean a lot. I want you to take some fiction, some nonfiction, some prose, maybe even some, instructional learning books. And I want you to put them all together and put all of those together, some history, and put all of that together in one combined volume. And say, okay, this is how I want you to look at everything through the lens of this combined book. And when we think about it that way, it really helps us to understand and change our thinking about the Bible, because that's what's going on here. We have all these books from all these genres that are like from letters to poetry to history to prose to song lyrics, of praise. So all of these things are from all different places, from all different people, from all different times, and they're all put together. So when we read the Bible without actually understanding that we're reading one of 66 different documents, we're missing one hugely important piece of Scripture. We're missing context. Context matters. It changes how we read everything. So we're going to look at two passages, and the first of those comes from 2 Timothy 4, 11 through 13. So it's important for us to think first, who wrote this letter? So this letter was written by a guy named Paul. And with it being titled 2 Timothy, we think, well, obviously it must be written to a guy named Timothy. Then we need to think about the relationship. Paul and Timothy had this kind of mentor-mentee relationship. They were close friends. They were almost like father and son. So when Paul writes it, when you know that he's writing to someone who is like his son, it makes a little bit more sense when you see some of the wisdom he's trying to give him. But then you think, well, this seems oddly specific, so you have to think, well, where is Timothy and what is Timothy's occupation? Well, Timothy is in Ephesus, and he's a minister of a small kind of house church that meets at maybe a synagogue or maybe in a home, most likely. And so you think, oh, okay, well, this makes a little bit more sense to see what Paul is saying to Timothy now that I know that he's a minister in this town in Ephesus doing this ministry in a house church setting. So context helps us make sense of what we're reading. So Paul, in this passage, tells Timothy he left his jacket and he wants him to bring it to him with this guy named Mark. And so when you read that, it's like, what does that even mean? But then you think about, oh, okay, Paul is talking to a guy that is like his son and asking him to bring a friend that they would both know to visit him when he comes to visit him in jail. And so when you read that, you're like, what does this even mean? Why does this even fit? But when you have the context of what's going on, it's really helpful for you to see, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense why he would say this to this specific person at this specific time for this specific reason. Well, let me give you a second example. If you've been around the church for a while, you've probably seen this passage plastered on signs, talked about from classes, maybe even mentioned in a sermon. You've probably read or heard the verse Philippians 4:13. So does it mean what we think it means, though? And this is the struggle, because a lot of us use it and we put it on shoes and we put it as a poster in our car or in our wall in our house. And so we think this is what it means, like we've got it pegged, we understand it. But here also is a time when context helps. This is also a letter. This is a letter from the Apostle Paul written to an entire church, an entire group that's meeting together, most likely in homes or in a synagogue. And Paul writes this to them, and he wrote this to them about being in prison and about what it's like being arrested for your faith. So this section is really about Paul's contentment in the middle of all that. So Paul was dependent on Jesus. His close relationship with Jesus gave him the power and strength to persevere and find peace, even when he felt like he was going to give up, even when he felt like he could not go on any further. So when we understand all this, this really helps us to provide context for what this passage meant and really what it should mean for us. And so when we quote it and we write it and we think about it, sometimes we're taking it out of the context it was given in and trying to apply it to some life situations that we think, well, that's not really what it meant or what it was for. So we have to be thoughtful of what it was that Paul was really trying to say to this group of people. Now, I want you to think about it in another way. Imagine when you think about context, let's think about it in another way. So imagine if you found a note on the floor of your school. Sometimes this is kind of how Bible passages can be, if you just pick up one passage in the middle of something without thinking about what's really going on. So you read the note, and you understand the note was probably written for someone else. It's not to you. And so you understand a little bit about what's going on from the person writing it to the person receiving it. But you would probably also accept the fact there's probably more to the story than what you're able to read just on the surface. So without background and a bigger picture behind the words in the Bible, we're just guessing at what some of the things are supposed to mean and what we're supposed to learn from it. So this is what I don't want you to miss. I don't want you to miss this. If what we said last week is true, if the point of the Bible is to know God better, it's too important to just guess at what's going on when we read the Bible. The next time you come across a verse and you don't understand what it's saying or what the meaning is, I want you to try to ask a few questions. Here's the first. Who wrote this? And who was this written to? So who wrote this and who is it written to? As you read Ephesians or Colossians or 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, as you go back into the Old Testament and you read something like Habakkuk or Micah or Jonah or Amos, one of the prophets, who is this being written to? What are the prophets saying? What is Paul saying? What are the gospel writers saying? And who are they writing to? Secondly, why was it written down? What's the importance of it being written down, and why do we have it today? The last thing, what made people think this information should be written down and saved? So why was it written down, and what made people think it should be written down? So that's important too. After we ask those questions and we kind of develop this contextual framework, what I want you to do is think about an application question. Is this helpful to me, and how? With these questions, it's going to provide clarity for us. Context creates clarity when it comes to reading the Bible. And clarity helps us discover why what was written down and how it can be helpful for our lives right now. So what if you and I made the decision to quit looking at the Bible with all kinds of confusion and started looking at it with courage instead? So for many of us, we've put down the Bible or not opened the Bible. We haven't read a Bible plan in a long time, because when we do, we find confusion and we have just given up or said, that's enough. I don't really want to try anymore. But when you have this framework to ask contextual questions, you can understand and come at the Bible with courage, with curiosity, with wanting to know more. But so many of us have just kind of given up and said, oh, it's old. It doesn't apply to me anymore. It's not very relevant. It's not real. But I want you to take a second look I want you to come at it with courage. I want you to come at it asking the right questions, looking for what God may be wanting to do through the Bible in your life. What if we took the Bible seriously, even when things don't make sense immediately? So often we just quit. We don't understand one thing and we're done with it. We put it away. We don't think about it again. But hopefully providing these contextual questions will help you make that transition. I really hope you will take the time this week to allow the context of the Bible to provide clarity for you when reading the Bible. Just a couple of announcements as we close. Remember, tonight we have a bonfire devotional at the Neubauer's house. So that's going to be from 6:30 to 8. Dinner, desserts are provided. We really want you guys to bring some chips and drinks and be able to hang out with us for a while that night and enjoy their farm. We also want to remind you our huddle groups are every Wednesday night. So this Wednesday night we will be back in the gym. We want you to meet there. Remember, COVID protocols are still in place. We need you to wear masks. You'll have your temperatures checked, and we need you to stay socially distanced. And then the last thing, which is probably the most exciting, our Friendsgiving is happening on November 18th. And we want you to invite everybody you can think of to this awesome meal. Remember, COVID protocols will still be in place for our Friendsgiving. We'll need you to wear masks until you start eating. You'll be spread out and you'll be limited to how many people can sit at each table. And so we want to fill up the whole gym with as many people as we can, properly socially distanced, making sure that the meal is helpful, not only for your nourishment, but also that you can stay safe and we can all not get sick from this interaction. I've really enjoyed being able to talk to you guys about this again today. I hope this series is helpful for you as a family and for you students. We will see you guys on Wednesday night for huddle groups. Make sure in between now and then that you're reading the Bible plan in the app. And that's the explained Bible plan in the app. We should be on day 8 at this point. So if you need to catch up, the readings usually only take about 2 minutes each. You can catch up on those pretty quickly and be back with us starting today on day 8. I hope you have a great week. We'll see you tonight and again on Wednesday.